Welcome to the information session on the review of the World Heritage Management Plan for the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens. This session will run for approximately 1 hour with presentations from myself, Amanda Bacon from Heritage Victoria within the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Chris Dupay from Museums Victoria and Fiona Finlayson from the City of Melbourne. At the end of our presentations, there will be an opportunity for us to answer the questions that you've submitted via the Engage Victoria website. You can also submit questions via Slido following the link at the bottom of this video. Before we commence the presentations, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Victorians are very fortunate to have the magnificent Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens as a place that they can visit and experience. The building and grounds were designed by Joseph REB and constructed in 1879 to 1880 to house the International Exhibition of 1880 and later the 1888 Melbourne Centennial International Exhibition. These were the largest events staged in colonial Australia and helped to introduce the world to Australian industry and technology. The Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2004 under Criterion 2. This states, "The Royal Exhibition Building and the surrounding Carlton Gardens, as the main extant survivors of a palace of industry and its setting, together reflect the global influence of the international exhibition movement of the 19th and early 20th centuries. The movement showcased technological innovation and change, which helped promote a rapid increase in industrialisation and international trade through the exchange of knowledge and ideas." My presentation today will provide an overview of the process for the review of the World Heritage Management Plan and its component documents, including those required under the Heritage Act 2017. I'll address the legislative context, the World Heritage Environs Area buffer zone, known as the WEA, and its strategy plan. I'll also explain the role of the Steering Committee for the World Heritage Management Plan and also outline the plan and its component documents and the timeline for their review. I'll also provide a brief update on the review of the World Heritage Strategy Plan for the World Heritage Environs Area. The operational guidelines of UNESCO set out the measures required to manage and protect World Heritage sites. The Victorian Heritage Act 2017 provides the legislative measures to meet the operational guidelines for places in Victoria, which are both included in the World Heritage List and included in the Victorian Heritage Register. These are known as listed places. The Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens is currently the only listed place in Victoria. The state's other World Heritage site, Budj Bim Cultural Landscape, is not included in the Heritage Register, as the Heritage Act 2017 does not apply to sites where the heritage value is only on the grounds of association with Aboriginal tradition. Once a place has been included in the World Heritage List, the Heritage Act requires declaration of a World Heritage Environs Area, given the acronym WEA, to protect the World Heritage values of the listed place. This meets the UNESCO operational guidelines for a buffer zone. The WEA for the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens was declared and gazetted on the 11th of October 2007. The image on the slide shows the current WEA. It surrounds the World Heritage Site, but does not include the site itself. The area shaded pink is the area of greater sensitivity, and this contains the planning controls specifically designed to protect the World Heritage values of the site, including height controls. The controls are embedded within the planning schemes of the cities of Melbourne and Yarra. The Commonwealth Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999 applies throughout the WEA, and a proposal for works or activities may be a controlled action under that Act. Once the WEA has been declared, the Executive Director, Heritage Victoria, must prepare a draft World Heritage Strategy Plan for the WEA as soon as practicable. A World Heritage Strategy Plan must set out the World Heritage values of the listed place to which the World Heritage Environs Area relates, and set out strategies for the appropriate use and development of that area to ensure that the World Heritage values of the listed place are protected and managed. The Heritage Act 2017 sets out that once the draft World Heritage Strategy Plan for the WEA has been completed, the Executive Director must provide a copy of the draft plan to the Heritage Council for consideration. This slide shows the statutory process for approving a World Heritage Strategy Plan, showing that the Executive Director, ED, publishes the draft and calls for submissions, that the Heritage Council, HC, receives and considers submissions and may hold a hearing before adopting the plan with or without amendments. The diagram shows that the Heritage Council provides the adopted plan to the Minister for Planning, who may approve the plan with or without amendment, and where relevant, amends any planning scheme consistent with a strategy plan. This is also the process that applies to reviewing an approved World Heritage Strategy Plan for the WEA. The Heritage Act sets out that the Minister must appoint a steering committee for each listed place to prepare a World Heritage Management Plan and to assist in its implementation. The membership of the steering committee is set by the Heritage Act and must consist of the Executive Director, Heritage Victoria, as the chair, any person responsible for the management of the place if it is public land, and for private land, any person who is appointed by the Minister if they are the owner, occupier or concerned in the management of the land. The Minister may also appoint persons that they consider to be appropriate. Members of the Steering Committee for the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens World Heritage Management Plan are Stephen Avery as the Executive Director of Heritage Victoria as Chair, Lindley Croswell from Museums Victoria and Emma Appleton from City of Melbourne, both as persons responsible for the management of the site, Felicity Watson for the National Trust and Richard Swarrett from the City of Yarra, both as appropriate persons appointed by the Minister. The statutory functions of the Steering Committee for listed places are to prepare a World Heritage Management Plan, to assist in the implementation of the plan, and to report as required to the Minister on the carrying out of its activities. The Heritage Act defines what a World Heritage Management Plan must do, which includes to state the World Heritage values and set out policies to ensure that the values are identified, conserved, protected, presented, transmitted to future generations, and if appropriate, rehabilitated. It must also set out mechanisms to deal with the impacts of actions that can degrade or threaten to degrade the World Heritage values of the listed place. The Heritage Act sets out that once the draft World Heritage Management Plan has been completed, the Steering Committee must publish a notice stating its intention to submit it to the Minister for approval. This slide shows the statutory process for approving the World Heritage Management Plan, that the Steering Committee, SC, prepares and publishes the draft, receives submissions, may hold a hearing but must consider submissions, and adopts the plan with or without amendments. It then provides it to the Minister for Planning, who may approve the plan with or without amendments, and publishes a notice in the Government Gazette. This is also the process that's used to review the World Heritage Management Plan. The Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens World Heritage Management Plan was gazetted on the 26th of November 2013. It provides information on all the heritage values of the site, being world, national, state and local heritage values. The plan provides detail on the statutory and management frameworks that exist to ensure that the heritage values are protected and conserved. It contains the information necessary to meet the requirements of the Commonwealth Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. The plan states that it is to be reviewed 7 years from the date on which it was first approved, being 2020. The current Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens World Heritage Management Plan comprises the World Heritage Management Plan document itself and 4 other component documents as attachments. These are Attachment A, the Conservation Management Plan, which will be renamed the Heritage Management Plan; Attachment B, the Carlton Gardens Master Plan; Attachment C, the Royal Exhibition Building and Exhibition Reserve Master Plan; and Attachment D, the World Heritage Strategy Plan for the World Heritage Environs area. It is proposed that a new Attachment E will be created following consultation with First Peoples to discover, determine, define and document traditional owner and First Peoples cultural heritage values of the World Heritage Site. Each of the component documents will be reviewed individually as part of the World Heritage Management Plan review, and people will have the opportunity to comment on each of the reviewed drafts as they become available. The circle documents are the only ones that are required under the Heritage Act. However, all component documents form part of the World Heritage Management Plan, and therefore it's made sense to review them first, as they will inform the new World Heritage Management Plan. The slide shows the expected timeframes for the review of each document, although it must be noted that the timeframes may be impacted by COVID-19. Attachment A, the Heritage Management Plan, is currently in draft and available for public comment. Attachment D, the World Heritage Environs Area Strategy Plan, is expected to be available later in 2020, and the 2 master plans, Attachments B and C, are expected to be available for public comment in late 2020 or early 2021. The date for the new Attachment E is still to be confirmed. You're encouraged to visit the Engage Victoria website regularly for details of the reviews. This community consultation is a coordinated effort by all stakeholder agencies to engage with the broader community on the World Heritage Management Framework for the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens. It runs for 8 weeks until the 27th of July, and during this time you're encouraged to read the discussion paper, watch the short video, drop a pin on the interactive map, complete the survey, and upload any documents you believe are relevant to the management of the site. It's intended to be a broad consultation process for the World Heritage Management Plan and all the component documents. However, the Engage Victoria website will also enable specific comments on the drafts as they become available. The Royal Exhibition Building and Carlton Gardens World Heritage Environs Area Strategy Plan is currently being reviewed. The review is being undertaken by Hanson Partnership in partnership with HLCD on behalf of the Executive Director Heritage Victoria. Targeted consultation commenced in April 2020 for the preparation of the draft strategy plan, and the draft is expected to be available for public comment later this year. Some preliminary findings through the targeted consultation is that there is some support for strengthening planning controls in the WEA to better protect the World Heritage values. It's also been found that the statement of significance for the WEA could be altered to be more consistent in relation to social significance so that it fits within the guidance developed by the Heritage Council. There's some views that the views from the promenade deck of the Royal Exhibition Building should be considered as part of the view line analysis, and that the statutory planning mechanisms could consider some form of state-level management for the entire WEA. Input through this community consultation process will further inform the preparation of the draft strategy plan, and once the draft has been finalised, people can make a submission in accordance with the processes set out under the Heritage Act. That concludes my presentation. Thank you all for listening. I look forward to receiving your questions and answers at the end of this session. But for now, I'd like to introduce Chris Dupay, Manager Strategic Capital Programs, Museums Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda, and hello everyone. My name's Chris Dupay. I'm Manager of Strategic Capital Programs at Museums Victoria, and I'm here to talk about the role of Museums Victoria in the World Heritage management of this site. First of all, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, the Boon Wurrung and the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. First of all, I'd just like to reinforce what Amanda said about the World Heritage listing of the site, that we are talking about the Royal Exhibition Building and the Carlton Gardens, and it was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2004. And on the screen there, you can see what the inscription was for. It's for the Palace of Industry and its setting. So at Museums Victoria, we're responsible for maintaining that tradition. Here is the boundary of the site that Museums Victoria has responsibility for. As you can see, the property boundary is within the Carlton Gardens itself, and it's the area defined as the Exhibition Reserve, with the Royal Exhibition Building at the south end of that site, and indeed the Melbourne Museum Building at the north end and the plaza in between the two. Here you can see that in the drawing, Museums Victoria was given responsibility for this land as part of its responsibilities under the Museum Act 1983, and under that Act, Museums Victoria is responsible for managing the Exhibition Reserve, and its role is to control, manage, operate, promote, develop and maintain the exhibition land as a place for the holding of public exhibitions, and for the assembly, education, instruction, entertainment or recreation of the public or any sector of the public on that land. So since the original World Heritage Management Plan was completed, as Amanda said, and gazetted in late November 2013, Museums Victoria has undertaken several projects following up on some of the initiatives outlined in that Heritage Management Plan. In terms of building projects, we've undertaken the Western Garden project, which involved an archaeological excavation of the site at that end of the gardens, the installation of huge water tanks for water capture and storage and use on the gardens, and the reinstatement following those works of the German gardens. We've also undertaken the Royal Exhibition Building Protection and Promotion Project, which has only just completed, and it included the repair of render across the southern facade of the building and the dome and drum, and entirely repainting of those areas. It also included the reinstatement of the dome promenade, which was last on the site in 1920, and also the installation of an interpretation space and viewing gallery, work is continuing on at present. So here are some images from the works that were undertaken. It was quite a spectacular project, and many of you would have observed it in process, including the full scaffolding of the dome, which was the first time since the building was completed has had full works to the flagpole. The other part of the project has been to initiate some interpretation of the site, in particular a new experience in the basement, as well as reinstating the dome promenade, which you can see an image of there. There's also a picture there of some artefacts from the Twycross collection, which will be featured in our exhibition. The interior of the building is, of course, magnificent, and it's one of the things we're rightly proud of. I should note that there will need to be future works on the interior at some point to maintain its condition. We also are very proud of the range of events we host here at Museums Victoria. We feel it's a very important part of maintaining the World Heritage significance of the building, that it is a living exhibition hall, and therefore it is important that the community is able to participate in a very big range of events. And we have some pictures there of functions, the Melbourne University graduations, and indeed the Melbourne Fashion Festival. Also, there's the opportunity to do events which integrate the gardens and the exhibition buildings, such as White Night, which there are some images on your screen there, quite magnificent events. Our role in revising the World Heritage Management Plan includes two key documents, which Amanda alluded to. One is the Heritage Management Plan, previously called the Conservation Management Plan, which was originally prepared by Lovell Chen in 2007. Lovell Chen have redrafted on our behalf and the City of Melbourne's behalf the Heritage Management Plan. That document is now attached to the Engage Victoria website. If anyone wants to have a look at it and make comment, they're most welcome to do so. Please note that it incorporates feedback from many of the stakeholders involved in the earlier report, but that there will be a separate document, as Amanda pointed out, looking at the significance of the site from the point of view of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and we look forward to that. The other document we will be working on is the Royal Exhibition Building and Exhibition Reserve Master Plan, which will be commencing from July 2020. It will take quite some time to complete, and we hope to have that ready for public engagement early in 2021. This will be replacing the original master plan, which was prepared by Museums Victoria in 2006. So, just in summary, Museums Victoria welcomes your input into this process. We thank our partners at Heritage Victoria and City of Melbourne for this great collaboration, and we look forward to hearing from all of you. I'll now hand over to Fiona Finlayson from City of Melbourne. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris and Amanda. Hello everyone, my name is Fiona Finlayson and I'm Team Leader of Open Space Planning at the City of Melbourne. On behalf of the City of Melbourne, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. For the Kulin Nation, Melbourne has always been an important meeting place for events of social, educational, sporting and cultural significance. Today, we are proud to say that Melbourne is a significant gathering place for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The City of Melbourne is happy to partner with Heritage Victoria and Museums Victoria to conserve and manage this World Heritage listed site. As part of the World Heritage Management Plan review, the City of Melbourne is reviewing the existing master plan for Carlton Gardens. This first phase of listening to the community is hearing your responses to the whole of the World Heritage site. Of course, of particular interest to the City of Melbourne are your thoughts on the Carlton Gardens. On the Engage Victoria website, you can access the discussion paper, which outlines the history of the Royal Exhibition Building and Carlton Gardens and gives a full background to the review. You will find a range of survey questions about the site, including a number about Carlton Gardens specifically. The new Carlton Gardens Master Plan will outline the new long-term vision for the gardens and guide the development and management of the area for the next 10 years and beyond. Your response to the online survey and the comments you make will help us shape the revised master plan. Once we've produced a draft master plan, we'll come back to ask for your feedback on this important guiding document. The Carlton Gardens was first established for the use of Melburnians and visitors in the early 1850s. It was redesigned in the late 1870s to create the perfect setting for the impressive Royal Exhibition Building. Since then, some changes have occurred to the northern end and around the museum, but the vast majority of Carlton Gardens retains the same design as when it was laid out in 1880, making it one of Victoria's most important historic gardens. The City of Melbourne is joint trustee and the Committee of Management for Carlton Gardens. This means we are responsible for the planning and management of use and activity in the Carlton Gardens, as well as their maintenance. The City of Melbourne's open space strategy sets out a hierarchy for open spaces in the municipality, and it classifies the southern section south of the Royal Exhibition Building as a capital city open space, and the section north of the Melbourne Museum as a regional open space. A capital city open space is an iconic space primarily established and managed to stage activities and events of international, national, state and metropolitan importance, catering to a broad public need. These spaces are synonymous with the character of the City of Melbourne and provide facilities that are known by and primarily for international and interstate visitors to Victoria and the City of Melbourne. A regional open space caters to a Melbourne-wide catchment of visitors, as well as the local community. Generally, such spaces are easily accessible to people from adjoining municipalities and may be of regional, recreational importance and use and/or of regional environmental value. The current Carlton Gardens Master Plan from 2005 set out a number of actions to support public use and ensure sustainable management of the site. A large number of the actions from that master plan have since been completed. For example, the master plan recommended the reconstruction of the original formal planted garden beds that run the length of the Royal Exhibition Building, either side of the iconic fountain. These beds, known as parterres, were carefully researched and then reinstated as close as possible to the 1880 design. We understand that the Carlton Gardens, along with the Royal Exhibition Building, is a special place and holds important memories not just for Melburnians but for many Victorians as well as visitors. We would love your input during this first stage of the review so we can hear what you consider special about this place or what you think could be changed or improved in your words. So visit the Engage Victoria website. There you can read the discussion paper, which will give more background on the Carlton Gardens, as well as the other elements that Amanda and Chris have explained. Fill out the survey, pin your comments to the map, and submit your questions to the Q&A. And please make sure you register your details so we can keep you updated. We look forward to hearing from you. And I'll hand back to Amanda Bacon from Heritage Victoria.
Thanks, Chris and Fiona. Before we move to the question and answer part of this session, I'd just like to remind people to visit the Engage Victoria website, which is open for this community consultation phase until the 27th of July. During this period, you can drop a pin in the interactive map, participate in the survey, and upload any material that you believe is relevant to the review. However, we also encourage you to follow the page to ensure that you're regularly updated as the reviewed documents become available for your input. Remember, you can post questions to Slido by following the link at the bottom of this video throughout this presentation. I now invite our moderator, Fiona Darling from the City of Melbourne, to open up the first question.
Thanks, Amanda, and we'd like to welcome you now to our live Q&A session. I hope you enjoyed the presentations. We've had a great response to this information session, and we've got a number of pre-registered questions to go through first. So we'll start with those, and thank you to all of those who submitted. There is an opportunity to still ask a question of the panel using Slido, which is the link below your YouTube screen. You can put a question through on that as we go along, but we'll start with the questions that we've got. We've themed them into themes, and we'll start with wayfinding, interpretation and signage. Chris, I might start with you. Obviously, this is something that always comes up in all of our discussions and engagement. We've had a question from Sharon who says she was not even aware that this is a UNESCO heritage site. Greg has also asked about educational material and interpretation being readily available to the public. How are these things being addressed and what improvements can we make?
Thanks, Fiona. Well, look, it's a really good question. Obviously, it is one of the areas we're conscious of that we need to improve in. And it's a difficult one. Obviously, we have to find a balance. We can't have too much signage which will impact on people's general amenity and what is obviously a lovely public space. But at the same time, we do accept that we've got more work to do in terms of interpretation and wayfinding around the gardens and to the buildings. So it's going to be a focus for us at Museums Victoria, as well as for the City of Melbourne when we develop our master plans, which we have to review in the next phase of this process. But we appreciate the input into that, and particularly anyone who's dropped a pin, for example, on the interactive map on the website. That's really useful. It shows us where there are particular spots where perhaps we could do better. And yeah, generally we have to improve our integrated narratives about the history of the site for the general public and for tourists.
Great, thank you. Another question from Sharon was around the usage of the Carlton Gardens, and Fiona, I might get you to respond to this. Sharon mentioned that people taking dogs off leashes in the garden and owners not picking up after their dogs, which is damaging the trees. From the City of Melbourne, what would you say to that?
Thanks, Sharon, for that question, and we certainly acknowledge that dogs off leash where they're not meant to be off leash is frustrating and can be upsetting for people. Carlton Gardens is an on-leash area, as most of the municipality is. Similarly to what Chris just said, we could highlight people's awareness of this with increased signage, but that's not always necessarily the right approach. People generally know when they're not doing the right thing with regards to their dogs on and off leash. We do have animal management officers and park rangers who patrol our reserves and do issue infringements, as having a dog off leash where it's not meant to be off leash is contravening the Domestic Animal Management Act, and the activities local law also governs picking up dog waste. So we understand that's frustrating, but that is something that we will continue to monitor and enforce through our patrols.
Great, thank you. Question from Angie. Angie's asked, what plans does the committee have to ensure the Royal Exhibition building and surrounding sites are equipped with modernising features and innovative technologies to drive traffic, engagement and knowledge to the area? Chris, you touched a little bit about the importance of signage before. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, again, a great question, and it gets to that point I made about how much signage is enough, because what one people find is adequate maybe is too much for another person. So digital technology really offers us a great opportunity to give people really rich information which they can get from handheld devices. Everyone's got a phone, so the more that we can put information that can be downloaded on site with relevant markers at particular points that can tell the rich narratives that we have around the gardens and around the building, then that's the way we'd like to head. It also means we can plug people into broader research and send them in directions that they maybe didn't know so much about. So yeah, that's something we'll definitely be looking forward to developing in the next phase.
Sounds good. And the last one in this theme, Amanda, I might ask you this one. A question from Greg about can there be signage in the environs areas to assist tourists to locate the World Heritage Site?
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Greg. That's a great question. and it's something that the Steering Committee for the World Heritage Management Plan has been considering. How do we improve people's understanding as to the value of the area that surrounds the World Heritage Site, not just the World Heritage Site itself? We're anticipating that this will be addressed in the review of the World Heritage Management Plan itself, which will occur in 2021. So we anticipate that there would be a response in relation to improving the ability to understand the site and its context.
Great. Now, as we all know, this is, got lots of agencies involved in this one. There's lots of components to this project. We've had quite a lot of questions about governance and management and the review process. I might start with you, Amanda. Greg has asked a question about, can the governance structure and the management structure for the World Heritage Site and environs be changed? And also whether all members of the governance structure could have voting rights. Okay, there's a few aspects to that question. I might just start with the governance of the Steering Committee. The Steering Committee composition is established under the Heritage Act 2017, and the Minister responsible for administering the Act is responsible for appointing members to the Steering Committee. If people will have noted from the presentation that the Executive Director, Heritage Victoria, chairs the Steering Committee, and the other members appointed are those that have responsibility for the management of the land for the World Heritage Site. If there are issues in relation to the governance, I'd really encourage people to make a submission to address what their concerns are, where they believe there may be some deficiencies with the current membership. And that's something that, again, can be addressed as part of the review of the World Heritage Management Plan. In terms of the management regime for the site, that again is something that is being considered as part of the review of the World Heritage Strategy Plan, and that is to contemplate whether there may be, it might be appropriate to introduce some state-level controls. At the moment, most of the planning decisions to do with the World Heritage Environs area are made by the cities of Melbourne and Yarra. The strategy plan may contemplate whether it's appropriate to introduce some level of state control to ensure some consistency of decision making. Great. And another one for you, Amanda. Charles Salwine of the Royal Historical Society of Victoria has also commented on the governance and the plethora of parties involved, and suggests that there might be a lack of coherent oversight. He asked whether any consultant or other agency is preparing a review of the governance structure with the aim of ensuring oversight of the entire WHERE, or World Heritage Environs area, as a whole. So that would comprise the WHERE, the gardens and the Royal Exhibition Building. So building on what you've already mentioned, how else would you respond?
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting proposition. Thanks, Charles, for that question. It is something that the World Heritage Management Plan review will contemplate. It's too early for me to say at this point exactly what the terms of reference of that might be, but governance is something that will be considered as part of the review of the World Heritage Management Plan itself, which of course will include consideration of the management of the WHERE area.
Okay, great. Fiona, I might just throw back to you because we've had a live question about off-leash areas and dogs, and the suggestion about, is it possible to have an off-leash area at the north end?
Look, we will consider all possibilities in the review of the master plan. However, we are simultaneously undertaking a strategic review of dogs in open space across the municipality. So they actually tie in quite nicely, the timing of these issues. Whether there is an off-leash space in Carlton Gardens North, I don't know whether that will come out of that, or whether we look to another open space in the vicinity to service the inner city area.
So that'd be an opportunity in further consultation.
Definitely be an opportunity for further consultation, which has similarly been delayed due to current circumstances.
But watch this space.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving along, the theme about engagement with traditional owners came up, and we've had a question from Sharon. Great question about how are First Nations acknowledged and as well as from Marisabel Ramos from Aboriginal Victorian Department of Premier and Cabinet, has also questioned how Aboriginal communities are going to be included into the current history and interpretation of the whole site. Chris, I might start with you and then go to you, Amanda.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Look, it's a really, really good question and a very important one for us to address properly. All the organisations involved acknowledge the importance of, first of all, consulting with the traditional owners in an appropriate way, and broader Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, because we know the association with this site obviously goes back millennia, but is also very rich over recent times, and so we really have a lot of work to do to understand the complexities and the diversity of interests in this site. So we are looking to engage a specialist consultancy to oversee this work. We took it out of the current draft heritage management plan so that it would get a full and proper consideration, and we're proposing through the steering committee that the document that will come through this will form a separate and distinct part of the suite of documents in the World Heritage Management Plan. So we hope that that process will be commencing shortly and will be quite a lengthy process. Obviously there are a lot of stakeholders involved, both City of Melbourne's, the state's stakeholders, as well as the museum itself. We have quite strong connections. We have our First Peoples team internally here. We have the ULENG knowledge group, who are elders who inform us about decision making, and so we're looking for a very broad and deep engagement, which we hope we can commence very soon. Amanda, do you want to add?
Look, I strongly reiterate what Chris has just said. I suppose I'd just like to add that this approach is consistent with the review or consideration of all UNESCO World Heritage sites to ensure that Indigenous values are appropriately represented on those sites. So it's a piece of work that we're very pleased to be part of, along with the City of Melbourne, and we hope that the output of this project will result in a genuine and respectful consideration of Aboriginal values of the site.
Great, thank you. Marisabel also has another question around, is there any active Aboriginal committee as part of the Heritage Management Plan, and whether any related Aboriginal intangible heritage associated to the site must be included as part of the Heritage Management Plan? Chris?
We have an obligation under World Heritage values as part of the site to ensure that the traditional owners are appropriately consulted, and that's our first consideration, and that process, we've already contacted the traditional owners groups, and so we're commencing that process. There is no formal individual committee as such. We believe there's quite a broad range of stakeholders, and we have, with the City of Melbourne and Heritage Victoria, and indeed Aboriginal Victoria, tried to source the broadest possible range of people who can be involved, and we're keen to ensure that it is very open consultation and that we don't restrict who might have an interest in coming forward, because, as I say, the stories do go in many directions, and it's not just a simple linear sort of story to tell. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, thanks, Chris.
Okay. The other theme that we'll be discussing is the WEAR, or the World Heritage Environs Area. So Michael has asked whether, Michael from the Protectors of Public Lands Victoria, asked whether the strategy plan review for the WEAR will consider extending the WEAR as well as introducing mandatory height controls that will limit adverse visual impacts onto a World Heritage site. He suggests also that this may complement the City of Melbourne's sunlight public space policy. So 2 parts. Amanda, do you want to start with the first?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Michael. That's another really good question, and something that the strategy plan review will consider. At this point, it's really not possible for me to identify in any detail what the outcomes of that review might be. However, the review will consider what are the best possible controls to have in place to ensure that the World Heritage values are appropriately protected, whether that includes recommendations for mandatory height controls remains to be seen. Our initial conversations with the consultants suggest that there may be some merit in considering extending the weir, and there's been some discussion around the area at the southwest end of the site where the controls at the moment potentially may allow for some development that may have an adverse impact. But really, I suppose it's this review process. We're very keen to hear from people as to where they think there may be some development pressures on this, in the surrounding area, the area surrounding the site, and for people to identify those and make it form part of their submission. In relation to the sunlight policy, I might just hand to Fiona to address that.
Yeah, so the Sunlight to Open Spaces policy from the City of Melbourne is actually soon to be going through a panel process for a planning scheme amendment, and that policy seeks to protect winter sunlight access to open spaces. Carlton Gardens specifically falls into the category of parks that we would seek to protect from additional overshadowing between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the winter solstice, so June 21st. So any development that happens within the City of Melbourne or that impacts on Carlton Gardens, we would be assessing through that lens to try to make sure there's no additional impact.
Great, thank you. That brings us to questions particularly pertaining to the Carlton Gardens. So Fiona, a couple more for you. Greg asked whether the gardens could be transformed into world-class style and maintenance, and he makes a comparison to the standard and style to Fitzroy Gardens.
Yeah, look, Fitzroy Gardens and Carlton Gardens they're maintained according to the same service agreement or standards, but they are very different gardens. So the style of Fitzroy Gardens as compared to Carlton Gardens is a lot more intensive horticulture in Fitzroy Gardens as part of the heritage fabric, whereas Carlton Gardens is more open. The heritage management plan that is on the website, the draft that is available for comment right now, is that draws out the significant elements of Carlton Gardens, which does could draw your attention, I suppose, to the significant elements that are different to the sorts of things that Fitzroy Gardens is significant for. As I said, they are maintained to a very similar standard, but they are different places. And one of the key elements of Carlton Gardens is that it's long-standing, continuing use as an exhibition space, which is not just the Royal Exhibition Building itself, but the gardens themselves.
Great, thank you. And another question from Greg about consideration being given to the reinstatement of sections of the original iron fence to the gardens, which was removed in the 1930s.
Yeah, thanks again for that question, Greg. Look, it's not Council's policy to fence off areas of public parks, as maintaining access is really important. And the heritage management plan that I just referred to doesn't recommend reinstatement of the cast iron fence to the external boundaries. However, it does suggest considering, in some circumstances, reconstructing some of the fencing that used to be in place around internal features, such as some garden beds. We'll consider this when we develop the draft master plan.
Great, and I'll just read out a comment from one of our viewers regarding the weir and the height controls. There's a comment that we need height controls in the buffer zone in regards to views out of the CBD so that the tree canopy is all that is visible other than for the existing buildings. So thanks for that comment.
One of the considerations of the weir strategy plan will be views from the promenade deck, which was not something that was considered when the first strategy plan was developed. And certainly so that the new plan or the objective of the new plan will be to have much closer consideration of those view lines out of the site as well as those coming into the site.
Yeah, great. So there's no Carlton Gardens without a Royal Exhibition Building, and a master plan coming for this too. So Chris, lots of questions about the building. One from Greg is about fire risks. It's a largely timber building, the Royal Exhibition Building. and the basement being used for museum storage. So do you want to talk to the fire risk?
Sure. Well, look, one of the really good news stories that we have, I suppose, is the project we've just recently finished, the Royal Exhibition Building Protection and Promotion Project, really focused on improving our systems, our fire systems in particular, as well as a number of other systems like our hydraulics. The water ingress was a significant problem before as well as repairing a lot of the surface of the building, the render and the paint. So we're very pleased to say that the fire systems have been brought right up to the best possible standard, and we're very conscious as a custodian of that building of the risk, and particularly after the horrible scenes coming out of Paris. What was it? Was it a year ago? Not that long ago. And certainly our board and executive are very focused on making sure we leave nothing to chance. And I should say with the basement, really important to note that one of the key objectives of the project was to remove all of those collection items. They're now stored elsewhere. It's actually better for them as it happens. But also it means we can now repurpose that basement space for public access, which is what we're undertaking at the moment.
Great, thanks Chris. So Marissa Bell from Aboriginal Victoria also asked what the plans are for that basement area. So you've touched on that.
Perfect segue.
Yeah, lots more to come.
Yes, I'll just say, so we are working on an interpretation experience for the basement. That will be the way that the public will then enter the building to go upstairs or up the lift to the Dome Promenade. So it'll be a part of that whole experience.
Great, sounds good. Now we've also got a new $20 million viewing platform, which everyone's excited about. There's a question from Greg about if it can be opened from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week for the public and tourists.
Well, the shorter answer is yes. That's what we're endeavouring to do. You know, one of the objectives was to create that all-round access for the public, understanding that we do have events on all the time, and indeed it can be challenging for people to get views. So that's been one of the key objectives. Whether it's 7 days a week, 365, I can't promise, but it will be as many days a year as we possibly can, and certainly Monday to Sunday. Okay,
great. The last theme that we'll get to is events, which is a nice segue from that comment. So I'm just conscious we've probably got about 10 more minutes. So we've got another question about to come from the pre-registered events. And we've got a couple of questions that have come on Slido, which is great. So if you've still got a question burning that you'd like to ask, now's your opportunity. So regarding events, Michael Petit from the Protectors of Public Lands Victoria has asked a number of questions related to the impacts of events, such as the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. Are the impacts on the Carlton Gardens flora assessed before the show? And when was the last assessment made? And then Michael also asked if considerations will be given to using hard surfaces and distance from trees on the siting of future events, including MIFGS. Fiona or Amanda?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Thanks, Michael, for that question. Look, the gardens are inspected before, during the setup, immediately after, and 3 months after the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show every year. This is in order to, that we can be comfortable as the City of Melbourne that there is any damage caused, not just in the immediate aftermath, but any evidence that comes to light of an impact 3 months down the track can be rectified, and the event organisers do rectify any damage. We've put in a lot of requirements to modify infrastructure over the last few years, so whether that's using elevated decks or specific type of matting to reduce the compaction on the grass. That's actually had a pretty profound impact on the state of the grass and the landscape following the event. We've actually found negligible soil compaction after the event for the last few years. As I said, any damage must be rectified, and all works in tree protection zones in particular are done according to a tree protection plan and in the presence of an arborist. And in addition to that, Amanda can add.
Well, look, all I was going to say was that any events held on the site require approvals under the Heritage Act. The building is both included in the State Register as well as the World Heritage List. And that permit would also contain conditions which would be actively monitored by Heritage Victoria, and ensuring that the permit was fully complied with.
Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add about events?
No, I think not. I think, again, we're trying to achieve a balance between, you know, a site which is world renowned and has its World Heritage listing because it's a continuing place for public events and expos, and therefore it's incumbent upon us as custodians to ensure that continuing use, but at the same time make sure that it's not doing any undue damage. And we have the same challenge obviously within the building and the exhibition reserve.
I might just add one last thing, and that is to acknowledge that there is an impact on the reserve from the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, of course, but that we do believe that it is managed in a way that minimises that impact.
Great, thank you. Well, that takes us to the end of our pre-registered questions. So I might move on to the questions that have come through live as we've been through doing this session. The first one I'll ask is about the marketing and communications of this consultation. So the questioner has asked, how will the partnering organisations make sure that the public consultation is marketed widely to capture a really good range of responses? So just open to anybody.
I'll kick off if you like. It's a really great question, particularly in the environment that we're in at the moment, where our marketing and communications have had to adapt to a very different environment. We're utilising social media quite extensively. So people that use Facebook and Instagram may find themselves receiving posts around this consultation process. We've also done a letterbox drop to properties in and around the WEA to advise occupants that this process is underway. However, I should say that the actual review of the World Heritage Management Plan and the strategy plan are statutory processes under the Heritage Act. This is also covered in the presentation. So there is an obligation upon us to ensure that people are appropriately notified of those review processes. So in some ways, the process we're embarking upon at the moment is a reasonably informal process where, as I said, we're using social media. There's signage on the site to advise people that this consultation is underway. However, there will be more formal processes undertaken which will require a formal notification. Chris or Fiona?
Well, I think it's really important to note this is kind of the beginning as well. What we've got at the moment is we've got the Heritage Management Plan up on the website for comment, and that's probably the first official document which has been redrafted of the suite of documents that need to be completed. So we encourage people to have a look at that and make any comments they feel are appropriate about that. We believe it's an improvement on the previous document, and it's picked up a lot of areas that were perhaps not properly covered, although, as we've already said, we believe First Peoples' significance and values really, that's the next important piece of work we want to do. And then we commence the kind of work of ideas generation around master plans for ourselves as well as City of Melbourne. And we've made a commitment with City of Melbourne to work in a really close and integrated way, because there are only artificial barriers between the parts of the site that we manage. So we'll have to work very closely, and there'll be opportunities through that process, probably towards the end of this year or early in the new year, for the public again to re-engage with some of those ideas. So it's just the beginning really in terms of a lot of the consultation.
Great. A couple of questions from Ken at Engineering Heritage Victoria. It's about whether we can put up permanent exhibitions in the space, but particularly to establish or to showcase the innovative technologies exhibited in 1880 and 1888. And we've also had another question similar to this, about recreating some of those external exhibits visible in the older photos of the southern part of the Carlton Gardens. So questions about, can we put in more permanent old...
It's a really tricky balance again. Obviously, if you are regulars at events in the exhibition building, you'll appreciate just how different each event is from the one before. And each event hirer obviously wants to remake it. And that's the beauty of the building, is that it's there as a blank canvas effectively. I mean, it's a very grand blank canvas, which elevates anything that goes in it. But if we start blocking off parts of it to permanent exhibitions, then we are minimising its use as a flexible space. So having said that, we are dedicating the basement space that we have created, which is only a small space at this stage, but we have plans where we could expand that, where we will increasingly try to introduce the narratives from the history of the building, and particularly some of the artefacts we've got in our museum collection, which were collected from the Melbourne exhibition. And indeed, you know, that's the opportunity down the track where we could curate more shows. But that's going to be a future expansion opportunity. I guess that's the thing. We really value people's advocacy and support, because there's more work to do, both in terms of maintaining this site and building on the interpretation. It's going to require a lot more work and time and resources.
Yep. And Ken has some other suggestions about maybe placing subtle markers in the Carlton Gardens lawn that might show the extent of the original 1880 temporary buildings. So thank you for that suggestion, Ken.
That's a lovely idea. And again, we could do that with digital technology. There's the opportunity to be able to show on a phone where previous buildings were. So this is the sort of thing we can do with virtual technology as well.
Great. Fiona, did you have anything?
I guess just a similar point about not restricting the ability to use a space by having permanent infrastructure. So the gardens are there not just for exhibitions or for the Flower and Garden Show, certainly, but for the general public, for people to have their lunch and walk through. And it's really important to us that access is maintained for everybody who wants to use it.
Great. So another question regarding the northern portion of the Carlton Gardens. What work has been done to ascertain how close the present plan and plantings are to the 1880 original layout? And if that's too hard to answer now, we can take that on notice.
Look, it's certainly contemplated in the Heritage Management Plan, but over time the northern part of the gardens has evolved as a less formal space. It is a bit more neighbourhood-like. It does have, you know, play facilities and sporting facilities, and that serves a really important purpose for the surrounding community. But having said that, we'll review the recommendations of the Heritage Management Plan in line with the Carlton Gardens Master Plan development, and you know, if there's any opportunities to do something like that, then we'll look at it.
Great. All right, we've only got 1 more minute, so we'll leave the questions there, and thank you for everybody that submitted questions prior to the event and during the event. Amanda, I might hand over to you for concluding remarks.
Thanks, Fiona. I'd first just really like to thank my co-panellists, Fiona Darling from the City of Melbourne, Fiona Finlayson from the City of Melbourne, and Chris Dupay from Museums Victoria. Thank you all for giving up your time and assisting, contributing to today's presentation. I'd also really like to thank everyone who made submitted questions, either as part of their registration or as part of the online forum today. I think, as Fiona mentioned previously, all questions and answers will be published from the Engage Victoria website. So keep an eye on that site. We'd hope to have all the questions and answers up by probably mid to late next week. That'll also include questions that we weren't able to answer today. And thanks to everyone who's participated in the session. We really appreciate you giving up your time and hope that you've gained a greater insight into the review process for the World Heritage Management Plan for the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens. Don't forget to visit the Engage Victoria website and click the follow button so that you're regularly updated. And we look forward to receiving submissions and your input over the coming weeks, remembering that this consultation process concludes on the 27th of July. So thanks again. You'll see at the bottom of this video or this presentation, there's a Slido poll. We ask that you just spend a couple of minutes. There's two quick questions. It would really help us to understand whether this session's been useful. It's a first time presenting in this way, so it's been a slightly unusual experience for all of us. So we'd really appreciate your feedback as to how the session has run. Thanks again, everyone.